The reinforced chair slammed into its deck socket hard enough to shake pale mineral dust from the ceiling. Kavra Jun watched two technicians lock the final brace into place, while another impact rolled through the buried crisis room beneath Demaris Step City. The wall beside her answered with a faint blue shimmer. The city's safety glaze remembered sudden energy, holding a ghost of the vibration for a few breaths before fading back to white. "Too loose," Kavra said. The technicians checked the brace again. "It will hold a human," one of them assured her. That was not what Kavra had meant. She stared at the chair. It was wider than an Edrassi command seat, reinforced across the back, and built to withstand the heavier frame of a human officer. The human military liaison had requested no such accommodation. Kavra had ordered it anyway. Everyone on Edrasa knew the stories. They knew about human line infantry holding positions other species abandoned. They knew about human engineers repairing defenses while those defenses were still under fire. They knew about ordinary human soldiers walking into conditions that veteran Edrassi commanders classified as unrecoverable and somehow turning them into problems with solutions. Those were the regulars. The thought had been comforting until this morning. Now the Demaris Civic Shelter Corps was occupied, its lower systems under hostile control, and a large part of the city's civilian population was trapped inside. The Kalvek commander responsible had chosen his target carefully. The shelter was not merely a bunker. It was a buried organ of the city. Water circulation passed through it. Emergency medical reserves were stored there. Pressure regulators kept the lower districts stable against the shifting mineral shelf beneath Demaris. Transit corridors connected refuge chambers that had been built over generations. An orbital strike could have killed the invaders. It could also have killed everyone they were using as leverage. A conventional assault could retake the shelter. It might rupture half the systems. The civilians needed to survive long enough to be rescued. Kavra had therefore requested human assistance. She had expected a battalion. Her communications officer turned from the main console. "Human transport has entered the upper approach." Kavra straightened. "How large is the deployment?" The officer hesitated. "Small." "How small?" "Not a battalion." Kavra felt something cold settle beneath her ribs. "Company." The officer glanced at her. "No." Another distant impact came through the rock. The mineral glaze along the western wall lit for a moment, tracing a thin blue scar before slowly dimming. Kavra looked toward the secured door. What exactly did they send? The human liaison answered from behind her. "Special Forces." Kavra turned. Colonel Saren Vale stood near the room's tactical table, one hand resting beside a projection of the shelter core. He had arrived with the first human advisory group months earlier, and had somehow remained irritatingly calm through every stage of the occupation. Kavra studied his face. There was no smile. That made it worse. "You told me human regular infantry were among the most capable forces available." "They are. And these are more capable." Vale considered the question. "That depends on the problem." Kavra hated answers like that. "Colonel." He nodded toward the tactical projection. "You cannot use overwhelming force. You cannot risk the shelter systems. You cannot isolate every civilian chamber. Your enemy controls the doors, the transit shafts, the medical circulation grid, and the pressure regulators." "Yes." "So this is not a problem for overwhelming force." Kavra looked at the wide reinforced chair bolted into the deck. "What kind of problem is it?" The crisis room door opened. The humans who entered did not look like the monsters Kavra had imagined. There was no ceremonial armor, no oversized weapons, No heavy exoskeletons. No banners. No visible symbol announcing that these were the warriors other humans considered exceptional. A woman entered first carrying a compact rifle across her chest. Her dark field uniform had been repaired in several places, and a thin strip of dust ran along one shoulder where she had apparently leaned against the transport hull. Behind her came a medic carrying a pack, an engineer with a tool roll clipped beneath his weapon, a signals specialist, and several others whose equipment differed just enough to suggest that no two of them expected to perform exactly the same job. The woman glanced around the room. Her eyes touched the tactical display. The exits. The ventilation indicators. The personnel. Then the reinforced command chair. She walked directly to it. Kavra felt a small pulse of satisfaction. At least that preparation had been correct. The human gripped the release lever. The chair folded flat against the wall. Kavra stared. The human turned back toward the room. Major Celeste Rook. Kavra looked at the folded chair. You will not be using your command station. Rook followed her gaze. No. You are the mission commander. Yes. Then where will you command? Rook pointed at the shelter projection. In there. Kavra waited for the rest. There was none. Colonel Vale introduced them. The medic was Sergeant Elias Dane. The engineer was Petty Officer Hannah Vell. The signals specialist was Aaron Beck. Others followed, their names passing through Kavra's mind faster than she could attach rank, specialty, and position. That bothered her. Adrasi military organization was visible. Rank stood where it belonged. Command sat where it belonged. Information moved upward. Orders came downward. A soldier knew where to look when the situation became uncertain. The humans spread around the tactical table without any obvious concern for who stood closest to their commander. Rook enlarged the shelter map. Show me what the Kalvek changed after entry. Kavra activated the occupation overlay. They sealed the western transit stack first. Why? We assumed to divide the shelter. Rook looked at Dane. Alternative. Movement shaping. Kavra glanced between them. Rook did not ask him to explain. Dane pointed to the medical circulation branches. If they control the western stack, civilians from the lower chambers are forced toward these service passages. The human engineer leaned closer, which puts them near pressure access. Kavra stiffened. You believe they moved civilians deliberately. I believe your enemy likes intersections, Rook said. People, infrastructure, and choices in the same place. She looked at Kavra. Where is Commandant Dayan Krall? Kavra highlighted the central administration vault. We believe here. Believe. He has transmitted from there. That is different. Kavra's frustration sharpened. He is the Kalvek commandant. Their forces use centralized command doctrine. He will remain near the strongest communication node. Rook glanced at Vale. Vale said nothing. Kavra noticed the look between them. What? Rook zoomed in farther. Krall studied human conventional operations before taking Demaris. Kavra nodded. He openly claims that is why he chose this shelter. Then assume everything visible is visible because he wants us to see it. You think he wants you to attack the administration vault. I think he wants us to believe that taking it ends the occupation. Kavra folded her arms. And does it? No. The answer came from Dane. Kavra looked at him. He tapped the pressure network. Civilians still need this. Then the medical loop. This. Then the evacuation corridors. And this. Rook nodded. The mission is not to capture Crawl. Kavra stared at the human commander. He seized my city. He seized part of your city. He killed defenders. Rook's expression did not change. And I still do not need him dead to complete the mission. Kavra expected the statement to sound weak. Instead, it sounded like a boundary. Rook began assigning objectives. Not locations. Objectives. Preserve pressure circulation. Recover civilian access. Break hostile control over internal movement. Keep the medical loop functioning. Prevent the Kalvek from relocating civilians into infrastructure-critical compartments. Maintain enough uncertainty that Crawl could not confidently begin destroying systems. Kavra waited for Rook to divide every corridor. She did not. She gave each human a purpose, constraints, and a limited collection of known facts. Then she started asking them questions. Not whether they understood her orders. What would make them abandon an approach? What they would protect before their assigned route? What they could damage? What they could not? When they could proceed without confirmation? When they had to stop? The humans answered in short phrases. No speeches. No ritual acknowledgments. No repeated assurances that they understood. Kavra found herself increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, she asked, "Where is the complete operational sequence?" Rook looked at her. "There isn't one. You are entering an occupied subterranean installation." "Yes." "With civilians distributed through unknown positions." "Yes." "And the enemy controls much of the surveillance network." "Yes." Kavra gestured at the humans. "Then how can they know what to do?" Rook rested both hands against the tactical table. "They know what has to be true when we're finished." Kavra thought that was the most human answer she had ever heard. It was also, she suspected, the most dangerous. Commandant Day and Crawl watched the humans enter Demaris through 3 separate maintenance approaches. The first thing he felt was relief. Not because they were weak. He had spent too long studying humans to make that mistake. Other commanders had died from it. They had looked at human physiology and seen soft skin. They had looked at human ships and seen ugly hulls. They had looked at human soldiers and seen a species without claws, venom, or natural armor. Then the humans had educated them. Crawl respected education. He had studied every available recording of human conventional warfare. He had learned the rhythm beneath it. Human units moved with frightening speed, but not randomly. They relied on coordination. Fire supported movement. Movement created position. Position created options. Their officers communicated intent quickly. Their non-commissioned leaders converted that intent into action. Their soldiers trusted the chain because the chain worked. Crawl admired the system. And anything that was a system could be broken. The humans had sent a very small force. That made his task easier. His intelligence chief magnified one feed. There. Major Celeste Rook paused beneath a maintenance arch, while another human examined the floor ahead of her. Crawl leaned closer. How certain? Transport records identify her as mission lead. Rank. Major. Crawl allowed himself a thin smile. Humans like to pretend that rank was not everything. That was theater. Every military civilization eventually rediscovered the same truth. Someone had to decide. Someone had to know. Someone had to command. Remove that person at the correct moment and uncertainty would do the killing for you. Do not engage yet, Crawl said. His officers looked surprised. The humans are inside the western access. I know. They may reach the lower utility junction. Let them. Crawl watched Rook move deeper. The human formation was loose. Too loose. One operator moved ahead. Another vanished into a service alcove. The medic remained near the rear for several minutes before suddenly taking a different passage with another member of the team. Crawl's intelligence chief shifted uneasily. They are separating. They are mapping us. Should we close the sections? Not yet. Crawl touched a control. Across the shelter, doors remained open. The humans advanced. They found less resistance than expected. That was deliberate. Crawl wanted them comfortable enough to trust their communication. He wanted Rook talking. He wanted her subordinates listening. Then he wanted silence. Kavra remained in the crisis room beside Colonel Vale. The command chair stayed folded against the wall. At first the operation looked almost insulting. There was no grand assault. No human charge. No massed fire. Instead, tiny status changes appeared on the shelter projection. A maintenance seal opened. A civilian compartment became reachable. A pressure branch changed from unstable to holding. A group of Edrasi hostages moved from Kalvik-controlled space into a neutral service area. Kavra watched the updates. That was Dane. Vale checked the identifier. No. Then who? Hannavil's cell. The engineer. Yes. Why is an engineer moving civilians? Vale glanced at her. Because they needed moving. Kavra clicked her jaw in irritation. Human answers were contagious. Another update appeared. A shelter corridor previously marked hostile turned neutral. Then another. There had been gunfire. Kavra knew because the mineral glaze feeds showed brief blue-white streaks along the walls. But far fewer than she expected. Kalvik rifles left bright, jagged afterimages. Human weapons left shorter marks. Controlled bursts. Brief contact. Movement. The walls were beginning to tell a story. Most of the panic belonged to the defenders. Crawl is yielding space, Kavra said. Vale nodded. You see it too. He's pulling them inward. Yes. Kavra turned sharply. Then warn Major Rook. She knows. How? Because she would do the same analysis you're doing. Kavra hated that answer more than the others. She reached toward the command network anyway. Before she touched it, every human marker on the tactical display vanished. The room went still. Kavra stared. What happened? Her signals officer began working. Human tactical links are gone. All. Yes. External relay. Gone. Local mesh. No response. Kavra looked at Vale. The human colonel was no longer relaxed. Get them back. The signals officer shook his head. Something has flooded the buried repeaters. It isn't ordinary jamming. A new warning appeared. Internal transit sectors began sealing. Not randomly. One after another, heavy doors closed between the human cells. Kavra understood at once. Crawl. Vale nodded. The central projection flashed. A hostile transmission arrived. Commandant Dayan Crawl appeared above the tactical table. He wore dark Kalvik armor without a helmet. His broad face held the calm satisfaction of someone reaching the final step of a calculation. Colonel Vale, Crawl said, Defense Liaison Jun. Kavra stepped forward. What have you done? Exactly what your human allies would have done to me. He changed the feed. A security image appeared. Celeste Rook stood behind a sealed emergency barrier somewhere inside the utility spine. Heavy shutters had closed on both sides of her position. She was alone. Kavra's throat tightened. Kral saw it. "Yes," he said softly. "Your commander." Vale's face gave away nothing. Kral continued. "I permitted her people to enter. I permitted them to separate. I permitted them to establish dependence on their local communication network." "You think humans depend on permission?" Vale asked. Kral smiled. "No, I think they depend on command." He changed the projection again. A schematic showed the human cells divided across the shelter. "They cannot speak to one another. They cannot reach Rook. They cannot reach you." Kavra looked at the folded chair. For the first time since the humans arrived, she wished Rook had been sitting in it. A commander belonged where communication could reach her. A commander belonged where the whole battlefield could be seen. A commander. Kral spoke. "Your humans are skilled. I will not insult them by pretending otherwise. Their regular soldiers have frightened half the galaxy because they coordinate faster than most species can think." His gaze hardened. "But coordination still requires a center." Vale remained silent. Kral leaned toward the transmitter. "Watch what happens when I remove it." The feed ended. Kavra turned on Vale. "You knew he might attempt this." "Yes." "And you let Rook enter." "Yes." "Her team is blind." "Partly." "They are separated." "Yes." "They cannot receive orders." "No." Kavra stared at him. "Then the mission is over." Vale looked toward the dark human markers. "No." Something in his voice frightened her more than Kral's confidence had. Kavra stepped closer. "Colonel, your mission commander is physically isolated." "Yes." "Your communications are gone." "Yes." "Your teams do not know what the others are doing." "Correct." "Then what exactly are they supposed to do?" Vale looked at her. "Their jobs." Elias Dane felt the communication link die while kneeling beside an Edrassi child. The child's breathing membrane had tightened from dust exposure, not critical yet but frightened. The tactical channel clicked once. Then silence. Dane pressed the side of his headset. "Nothing." The operator beside him tried the backup. "Nothing." A heavy door slammed somewhere behind them. The sound rolled through the corridor. The mineral wall flashed bright blue along the frame, preserving the violence of the closure in a slowly fading outline. Dane looked at his teammate. "Separated." "Likely." "Rook." "No contact." Dane glanced at the civilians gathered in the service recess. He did not know where Rook was. He did not know whether the other cells were moving. He did not know whether the pressure branch had been secured. He did not know whether Kral had begun relocating hostages. He knew what had to be true when the operation ended. Dane rose. "We still have the civilians." His teammate nodded. "The eastern extraction path may be closed." "Then don't use it." "What about command?" Dane looked down the corridor. "Not available." That was all. No declaration. No dramatic assumption of leadership. No claim that he was now in charge. There was a difference between needing authority and needing ceremony. Dane checked the next junction manually. The door was sealed. He looked at the maintenance panel. The humans had been told not to compromise shelter pressure systems. So he could not simply force it. He pulled the panel open instead. Behind it, the emergency interlock showed a small mechanical override. The Kalvik had locked the electronic controls. They had not removed the physical safety release, because doing so might trap their own people during a pressure failure. Dane smiled without humor. Good. His teammate looked over. What? They still want to survive. They opened the door. Hanavel lost communications in a chamber beneath the main water exchange. She waited several heartbeats. Not because she expected the network to return. Because immediate reaction after losing information was how mistakes multiplied. She listened. Pumps. Water movement. A distant mechanical knock. Boots somewhere above. Her original assignment had been to stabilize civilian access through the utility junction. That route was no longer reachable. The mission had not changed. Civilians needed pressure. Civilians needed movement. Crawl needed to lose leverage. Vel opened the nearest control cabinet. The Kalvek had rerouted several pressure gates to Central Command. Predictable. She could not seize the network remotely. Also predictable. So she stopped thinking about the network. She began working on the valves. Aaron Beck found himself in darkness when the transit section shut down. He had been the team's signals specialist. Now the signals were gone. For several seconds, that made him the least useful person in the shelter. Then he noticed the emergency light behavior. The floor strips were pulsing. Not an alarm. A maintenance diagnostic. Somebody had changed a pressure state elsewhere in the shelter. Beck watched the sequence. He had no idea who. He did not need to. The eastern branch was being stabilized. That meant somebody else had chosen to protect infrastructure. Good. So Beck chose something else. He moved. Kavra watched the first human marker return to the tactical display. Not because communications had been restored. An Edrasi shelter sensor had identified movement. Then another marker appeared elsewhere. Then a civilian chamber switched to evacuating. Kavra leaned over the projection. How? Her signals officer shook his head. No human communication detected. Another civilian route opened. Kavra looked toward Vale. Are they using a hidden channel? No. You're sure? Yes. Then Rook is transmitting somehow. No. How can you know? Because if Rook had a hidden link, Krawl's plan would be less useful to us. Kavra stared at him. Useful. Vale looked back at the projection. He wanted to know what happens when he removes our command network. A new pressure indicator stabilized. Now he gets to find out. Krawl stood in his administration, Vault watching his victory become confusing. At first, everything had behaved correctly. Rook isolated. Communications destroyed. Transit segmented. Human movement disrupted. Then the civilians began moving again. Not all at once. Not in a centrally coordinated wave. That would have made sense. Instead, separate pockets started escaping Kalvek control for apparently unrelated reasons. A lower medical group found an unlocked maintenance route. A refuge chamber gained access to a service lift crawl had not ordered opened. Pressure circulation shifted, forcing several Kalvek squads to abandon positions where their sealed armor risked thermal buildup. An emergency barrier closed behind another human cell, but instead of trying to reopen it, they simply changed direction. Krawl's intelligence chief stared at the map. They are improvising. Improvisation creates contradiction. Yes, Commandant. Then find it. The officer worked. Minutes passed. More changes appeared. They are not contradicting one another. Krawl looked at him. That is impossible. The humans could not know the whole situation. They could not share information. Therefore, independent action should produce conflict. One cell should open something another needed closed. One should advance while another needed delay. One should compromise a system another assumed stable. But that was not happening. Crawl magnified the utility levels. How are they coordinating? We detect no transmissions. Signals through the walls. None. Prearranged timing. Their actions do not match fixed timing. Then what? The officer had no answer. Crawl did. He just rejected it. They were guessing. Humans were unusually lucky. That explanation lasted until the medical circulation returned. Elias Dane reached the chamber where the Kalvek had concentrated several groups of civilians. He had expected guards. He found frightened civilians and only a small hostile detachment. That told him something. Crawl was losing freedom elsewhere. Dane did not know why. He did not need to. He knew what the reduced guard presence gave him. An opportunity. The confrontation was brief. The wall glaze flashed with sharp lines where Kalvik fire struck. Dane's team returned controlled bursts. The luminous marks faded slowly behind them as the humans moved. When it was over, the surviving defenders had withdrawn deeper. Dane did not chase them. Civilians first. A young Edrasi pointed toward an injured shelter worker. Dane lowered his rifle and moved immediately. His teammate watched the corridor. Crawl's people are falling back. Good. Could pursue. No. We might get his command route. We already have the thing we're here for. Dane nodded toward the civilians. His teammate understood. They moved. Celeste Rook sat on the floor behind the sealed emergency barrier. Her weapon rested beside her. A Kalvik surveillance camera watched from the ceiling. She knew Crawl could see her. That was useful. She also knew her team could not. That was expected now. Not planned. Expected. There was a difference. Rook had not entered Demaris knowing where Crawl would isolate her. She had not predicted the exact door. She had not predicted the specific jammer. She did not know what her people were doing. For all she knew, some were pinned down. Some might be injured. Some objectives might fail. Special operations did not make uncertainty disappear. It demanded that people work inside it. Rook examined the barrier controls again. No safe release. She sat back down. The camera remained fixed on her. She looked directly into it. Then she smiled. Not because she knew they were winning. Because Crawl thought she was the mission. Kavra saw the civilian count inside hostile-controlled sectors dropping. She saw pressure stability rising. She saw the medical loop return. She saw Kalvek movement compress toward the administration levels. And still there was no human tactical network. She whispered, "They can't know." Vale heard her. No. They cannot know what the others are accomplishing. No. Then how are they choosing correctly? Vale considered the question. They aren't always. Cav returned. What? They'll make mistakes. You say that now. Of course. They may duplicate work. Yes. Choose inefficient routes. Yes. Miss opportunities. Yes. Then why isn't the operation collapsing? Vale pointed to the civilians moving through a service corridor. Because perfect coordination isn't the standard. What is? Enough correct action in the same direction. Kavra looked at the folded chair. Something about it suddenly seemed less like an absence. More like an accusation against her assumptions. Your regular forces don't fight this way. They can. But these humans are different. Yes. How? Vale's eyes remained on the map. Regular units are built to function inside a larger military system. These people spend more of their training learning what to do when pieces of that system stop existing. Kavra looked at the shelter map again. Krall had not destroyed the human operation. He had removed its comfort and discovered the operation had been designed to survive discomfort. Commandant Krall finally abandoned the theory that the humans were secretly communicating. He replaced it with a worse possibility. They received independent authority before entry. His intelligence chief looked at him. That would explain some actions. Not this many. No. Krall stared at the map. A military force could delegate small decisions. Every species did. But this was different. The humans were making decisions that changed the mission's shape. Changing routes. Abandoning planned access. Redistributing effort. Accepting local risk. Refusing pursuit. Reassigning tasks. One human he had identified as a medic was now leading civilians through a corridor Krall had expected only an assault specialist to exploit. An engineer had altered the shelter's pressure pattern in a way that forced Kalvek troops away from useful positions without endangering the civilians. A signals specialist, denied signals, had helped open a physical evacuation route. Roles were not disappearing. They were expanding. Krall suddenly understood why the humans had arrived with so few people. Not because each was better at one thing. Because each remained useful after losing the thing he had expected them to depend on. "Find Rook," he ordered. The image appeared. She still sat behind the barrier. Still isolated. Still doing nothing. Krall felt anger rising. He opened a direct channel to her compartment. The speaker clicked. Rook looked up. "You've lost," Krall said. She tilted her head. "Have I? I isolated you." "Yes." "I severed your network." "Yes." "I divided your unit." "Yes." "You cannot command them." "No." The simplicity of the answers enraged him. "Then why are they still moving?" Rook glanced at the camera. "Because you keep giving them problems." Krall stepped closer to the transmitter. "I gave them confusion." "No, you gave them smaller decisions." His jaw tightened. "You are their commander." "Yes." "They require your orders." Rook shook her head. "They required my intent." Krall stared. Rook continued. "I told them what we need. I told them what we cannot afford to break. I told them where their authority ends. And without you, they know where the mission doesn't." Krall cut the connection. For the first time since the humans entered Demaris, he considered retreat. Then the final access route to his administration level closed behind his own forces. Too late. Elias Dane reached the outer administration corridor without knowing that Celeste Rook was still trapped. He did not know that the pressure network was stable. He did not know how many civilians had escaped. He knew only what he could see. The corridor ahead contained the remaining organized Kalvek resistance. Behind him were civilians. The shelter was still standing. No catastrophic pressure warnings. No medical collapse alarms. No structural breach signal. Enough of the mission remained intact. A Kalvek voice came over the local corridor speaker. "Human." Dane stopped. "Listening. This is Commandant Dayan Krall." Dane glanced at his teammate. Neither spoke. Krall continued. "I will negotiate." "With whom?" "Your commander." "Unavailable." Silence. Then sharply. "Bring me the officer commanding this assault." Dane looked around the corridor. At the civilians. At the sealed doors. At the fading blue scars on the mineral walls. He keyed the speaker. You isolated our commander. Krall said nothing. Dane continued. You didn't isolate what she told us to accomplish. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Krall's voice returned. Who are you? Sergeant Elias Dane. You are not an officer. No. You are not the mission commander. No. Then you cannot negotiate surrender. Dane considered that. Your surrender. Yes. I can accept that. Krall sounded almost offended. By whose authority? Mine here. Dane heard movement on the other side of the sealed administration door. Weapons being lowered. Not all. Enough. Krall's voice came again, quieter. If I surrender to you, who defeated me? Dane looked at the wall. A bright Kalvek firing mark slowly dimmed in the mineral glaze until it disappeared. Does it matter? The door opened. By the time Celeste Rook was released from the sealed utility sector, Demaris Civic Shelter Corps was already returning to civilian control. Kavra met her near the upper crisis room. Rook's uniform was dusty. She had not fired her weapon. Kavra found that detail strangely important. You were trapped through most of the operation. Yes. You had no contact. Yes. You did not know Sergeant Dane was near Krall. No. You did not know the medical loop had been restored. No. You did not know the civilians were already moving out. No. Kavra stopped walking. Rook stopped with her. You're admitting this very easily. Should I invent a secret plan? Kavra almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she looked through the open crisis room door. The reinforced human command chair remained folded against the wall. Technicians had begun removing temporary equipment. Edrasi staff moved through the room carrying casualty reports, shelter status updates, and restoration requests. Sergeant Dane stood near the tactical table, discussing evacuation routes with an Edrasi medic. Hanavel was arguing quietly with a utility supervisor about which pressure valve should be replaced first. Aaron Beck had found a functioning terminal and was helping reconstruct the damaged communication grid. No one had taken the chair. Kavra entered. Rook followed. Colonel Vale looked up. Major. Colonel. Good timing. Rook looked around the restored crisis room. Seems late. Dane approached. Krall is secured. Rook nodded. Civilians. Moving. Critical systems. Stable enough for local teams. Losses. Dane's expression tightened slightly. Manageable, not clean. Rook accepted that. No victory speech. No applause. No declaration that the humans had performed the impossible. Kavra had imagined special forces would be frightening, because they would look less human than the regular soldiers the galaxy already feared. She had expected better weapons, better armor, better reflexes, more violence. Instead, the thing that frightened her was almost invisible. The humans had known less and kept acting. They had lost contact and kept choosing. They had been separated and kept moving toward the same end, without needing every path to be identical. Kavra touched the folded command chair. Major. Rook looked over. When we heard your regular troops were coming, my staff relaxed. That seems optimistic. The galaxy already fears them. So I've heard. Then Colonel Vale told us you were sending special forces instead. Rook gave Vale a look. He pretended to study the tactical table. Kavra continued. I thought the name meant you were stronger, Dane glanced toward her. Sometimes. Faster. Sometimes. More dangerous. Rook considered that. Depends who you're standing near. Kavra ignored the human humor. But that isn't the difference. Rook looked at the folded chair beneath Kavra's hand. No. Kavra finally understood why the humans had never unfolded it again. The galaxy had learned to fear what human regulars could do when their organization worked perfectly. Demaris had learned why humanity kept another name for the people trained to keep working when it didn't. Around them, the crisis room continued without ceremony. Reports changed hands. Doors reopened. Water moved. Civilians climbed toward the surface. And the command chair stayed folded against the wall.